Hello, everyone, and my name is Robert Galstian. Thank you for joining us today for the second of our Artists in Conversation series. Before we begin, I want to take a moment just to let you know that we look forward to hearing any questions you may have, so please feel free to submit them by using the Q&A button on your console. Thank you, Andreas, for being here today. For those of you who don't know Andreas is a contemporary artist that lives and works between London and Cyprus. He studied at the Architectural Association in London and received a master's degree from the Royal College of Art in London, as well as the IE Business School in Madrid. Trained as an architect, Andreas always suppressed his creativity until one day he moved into an artist studio and started painting as if that's what he was meant to be doing all his life. His bold work of familiar characters with subtle references is a manifestation of his artistic expression, where choices are constantly influenced by modern and contemporary masters. He attacks a raw canvas head-on, layering different media, while mark-making to create the composition liberated from any restraints. I am proud to have given Andreas his first show last year, in October, and since then he's been included in the Wall Supply's last group show at the Bellevue Art Museum in Bellevue, Washington. He currently has two upcoming shows, both here in LA as well as in Nicosia, Cyprus, and he's currently in In This Together for COVID-19 relief that I'm organizing as a fundraiser. So thank you very much, Andreas, for being here today.
Thank you, Robert, for having me.
So, it's pretty impressive. You have an architectural background. You definitely have been around with a business degree as well, too. So the obvious question is, how did you really get into art?
I mean, I don't think there's like a moment where I was like, there isn't such a moment. It was throughout my life. It's more about when did I decide that this is the career I want for myself. And that happened consciously at the beginning of last year. And ever since, I'm just trying to make this, because this is what I love doing, make this my life work.
Very interesting. So with that, let's go to the next slide here. And this is a photo of you in your studio with the works that were in the exhibition we did together last October.
Mm-hmm.
And you had just moved in your studio shortly before this, I believe.
Yeah, so this was just when I was moving and starting and making the first works. And yeah, so this was the first setup I had in the studio at the time.
So the paintings, as you know, I like these very much. They're very fun. They're very whimsical. And they're very relatable to characters that I grew up with watching television as a child. What really made you, what goes through your mind before you start working on a canvas? Do you know exactly what you're going to be working on, or?
I think I use these characters to convey an idea and an emotion. And I mean, there are some artists that each artist has a different reason to use the subject they're using. I think I use it as a medium to bring out the ideas I'm trying to investigate. And they're like a stepping stone for me to get to expressing myself.
Interesting. So this next slide is what I actually like to see personally, is a work, it's kind of like a time lapse of a work that was in progress, starting from a sketchbook in the upper left-hand corner and going to the final product in the lower right-hand corner. Could you walk us through your process?
Yeah. So each painting has I don't have one way of working, and each painting has its own story. But this is like a good example of a painting that has many points in its life until the finished result. And I mean, some of them start as a sketch, some of them start as a canvas. So this one, it started as a little sketch, which I knew I wanted to try in a different scale. So I started working on it. And each time you see one of the pictures, it was a moment where I paused to think of how I wanted the direction of the work to go. And if you can see, I mean, the middle bottom image, you can see how, I mean, I bring in the color to see if it works for me to go ahead and do what I wanted. I mean, there's a lot to talk about color in my works and how there isn't that much color, or there is. And this was one of the first times I was bringing color in. And I mean, this is, I mean, it can be considered like a slightly quirky way of, I mean, Garfield is orange. I brought a Dorito, the shape of a Dorito, and I made the triangle. So that's the way I brought color in, which is a very different way of like how color was throughout art history, for example. So I think that this is the right now and how color is applied in my canvas, currently.
So going to the photo in the lower, the middle photo in the lower row, that looks like you use Photoshop, I believe, right?
Yeah, so sometimes I use Photoshop, sometimes I use directly my phone, and it's just digital lines to see if compositionally that's what I wanted. And usually I have 3 versions before I go and do it with whatever the medium will be. I usually, on these canvases, I've been using spray paint, chalk, charcoal, acrylic. So, yeah.
Very, very nice. Very nice. Now, this photo here, I especially love because the top row are 3 paintings that were from the first show, or from a body of work from that period. And then the bottom row, I'll get to in a second, but the top row, what I like though is, and for the viewers at home, you can enlarge the screen on your end by expanding it with your fingers on your iPhone or iPad. And this way you'll be able to see, as Andreas said, he's uses color, but it's very deliberate. And you'll see the colors that he's using. You might think it's black and white or primary colors, but when you expand it, you'll see blues and grays in the top row. And what I like especially, Andreas, is you have a lot of layers within these works.
Yes.
And so before you got this final product, it was very, very different when you first started, obviously. Could you explain
We will talk about that in a bit in the next slides.
Okay.
But of course, I think that at the beginning, I was working in black and white because I wanted to bring my ideas as simply as possible. And I do have some under layers of color, like the top right. I mean, you can't see that, but the bottom layer is purple and blue. And then you can see that the very middle of it, you can see some purple and some blue, but there was a lot of purple and a lot of blue while it was happening. And I mean, this constant layering of this information, I think, until I get the movement and the emotion between me and the canvas and what I actually wanted to feel like. And if we talk about the bottom ones, which are the ones with the color, I wasn't ready in my practice to use color, and I have color as I save it for those moments where I know that it's needed. And it's just about when do I allow that color to come in and when do I stop it. And for sure, the top layer, the color is inhibited deliberately. And that's what I really like playing with. Like, how do you stop the color from, because it's so easy and so enjoyable to add as much color as you can on a canvas. And the other thing I want to talk about this is the bottom row. I mean, I'm always very interested between the relation of scale, the scale in a canvas, and the scale between me and a canvas. So, I mean, there you can see a progression of like close-ups of what a character is or what that emotion of the character is, and like the scale of an emotion and the scale of a line. So, yeah, that's what this is about.
Yes, the perspective is very is key, and I'm glad you brought that up. For me, if I were to see this in your studio or in a gallery, and if I start from the lower left on the screen, the eyes are very hypnotic for me, and it would grab me and grab my attention immediately, and I would wonder to myself, what is this image? And it's something that's quite engaging. And as I move towards the right and I see the middle one, I notice that you as the artist are backing up and putting more of the image within my view. And now I see your your creature is very happy. And now I'm actually more excited. Why is he happy about? And so I go to the next one to the right, and I see the full scale, and wow, this is phenomenal. So I never would have imagined the final, the one on the right, lower right, from seeing the one on the lower left initially. And what I especially like, which is maybe I'll digress a bit, is noticed you were sweeping your studio, and you've uncovered two eyes on the ground. So
Yeah.
that's actually kind of funny.
Yeah, so I mean, I love that image because of the like how dirty it gets in the studio, and then as you hoover it, it just like sucks everything in and it becomes clean again. But so those eyes, there are many more in the studio. So whenever I drip or make a mess on the ground, like a little eye appears, and that's what I was doing. I mean, just for fun in the studio. So yeah, that's what those two eyes are.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So um, now this next slide is a painting that you've graciously given towards the In This Together for COVID-19 Relief exhibition that we're currently doing to raise funds for first-line responders on a global basis. Its
Mm-hmm.
title ball is out. It just happens to be behind you right now.
Yeah.
So I love this image very much because on various levels,
Mm-hmm.
um, it looks very simplistic, but in reality, it's not. Um, I love the fluidity of motion. I'm sorry, I'll call this Felix the Cat. That's what it reminds me of from my childhood. And I don't know if Felix dropped the ball or is trying to catch the eight ball. And so please spend a few minutes and
Yeah.
talk about
So
this piece for us.
I mean, that's a very specific question, so I'll answer it. Like, so he's letting the ball go, but so this is like that's part of how like I bring autobiographical references to my paintings, and they're in those. I usually don't talk about that, but I think this is a very interesting moment we're living in right now, and how I mean this can be related to that, which is I see this painting as the translation of that moment you get when it's like you've just passed something really bad, which we're still in a bad situation. I mean, the bad situation hasn't passed, but it's when you're in a really bad situation, that situation goes away, and then you've got this feeling where everything is amazing. Like you go outside, and then the grass is greener, like you can smell nature. So, I mean, this is what I was trying to get to with this canvas. Is I wanted to get that feeling of this. It usually lasts not for too long, but it's that moment of like euphoria after a bad event, let's say. So this is what
Yeah.
this painting is about.
So I have a question that just came in from
Mm-hmm.
Catalina. She
Mm-hmm.
says they remind me of early cartoons before they became perfectly drawn and developed. Is this
Mm-hmm.
imperfection a reference to society in pop culture? As in, it's not
Okay.
perfect.
So for sure it is, and I mean, cartoons now are perfect, and cartoons weren't perfect. But I think, I mean, to me, why this is in my practice is because in architecture, it was always striving for perfection, and I'm just going 100% directly the opposite direction by not having a straight line, by not caring about things, by as soon as an error looks good, because there are errors that look bad, and that's not what I want. It's as soon
Yeah.
as I see an error that looks good, I keep it forever. So this is what the errors are in the paintings.
Mm, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So here's another example of like a time lapse
Mm-hmm.
of your work. And I see you start with a computer graphic or or photograph in Photoshop, and you move towards the right, you'll see the progression. What I love about this piece, the final product, obviously to the viewers, is the one on the right. Um, but the second from the left, I love because the fact is we're privy to seeing Andreas layering the work. So in the final product, we don't see any of the cat's body. We don't see the word brain that's been spelled out, or a lot of the imagery that's below that. So please, Andreas, why don't you explain this piece as well
Yeah.
too?
So, I mean, I want to start from the beginning, whereas compared to the previous time lapse we had, this one, it started on Photoshop, where I got an image of the image I wanted, but I completely distorted it to make the composition I wanted, compared to the previous one, which was a distorted composition by my hand. So like this is a very different process to begin with. And then I was trying to get to how I wanted the composition to be final. And I never know what the painting will look like. Sometimes I envision it, but it's very rare for me to like have an idea and that idea being 100% what I was thinking, but I'm always pleased and confident with that result. What I want to highlight is that the second image, I mean, I could have easily put it out in the world like that. And I don't think like someone that wanted that, I mean, I could have found someone that wanted that in their house. But because for me, there are some curves there that I wouldn't be happy with, I would never be able to live with the idea of that painting living in my studio. So, I mean, if you've seen the third image on Photoshop, I made the lower work, I whitewashed it, and then I added these clouds because I love clouds, and I'm not ready to paint clouds, and that's why they're green at the moment. And I then came to the composition that I was completely satisfied with through that process. So yeah, I think that's interesting how something that could have been a finished result is not until I get to the place I want with a painting.
Yes.
And one more small detail before we go on to the next slide is that I had a friend in the studio the other day, and they saw the little blue line at the right-hand corner of the painting. I don't know, it's a straight blue line.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Oh, yeah. So they saw that and they were like, oh, that's an amazing blue color. I want to see more of it. And I was like, yeah, if I gave you more of it, you wouldn't want to see any more of it. So that's why, I mean, that's all it needed for it to be perfect.
I see. Another question just came in, Andreas, from Lucas, is he's asking, you said that the work is autobiographical. Do you associate each character with a person in your life?
Sometimes I do, but it's more about through experiences, I get to put that experience inside the painting and think about that experience while the painting is happening.
Okay.
But I mean, of course, sometimes I think of situations and figures and they translate into paintings.
Okay. So this next slide here is two shelves of some small works that you're working on, which I think are brilliant. On the lower shelf, I see the pool balls, the billiard balls, and so it takes me back to the painting behind you with the 8-ball, entitled "Ball Is Out," and the top shelf, it's a study on eyes, I believe.
So those, I mean, they're small, so they can be called studies of eyes. But for me, they're like finished original works where when you have one on your wall, you can actually think of like what the whole wall could be as a monster, for example. And I think not many people want to have a big monster in their house. I would love that. But like maybe someone that has a more conservative view of like what like imagery you could have in your house, that little eye can help you just envision on a white wall what the bigger character like Felix would be. So yeah, that's what those series of works are. And I've only made 7 of them. And I do like to limit, like, once I know, oh, I've done what I wanted with that, I'd rather, like, there's no point of like making more. Like, I just want to be very particular with what I've achieved with a series of works. So yeah, that's what I did with those.
Okay.
And yeah.
And same with with the billiard balls on the bottom. You know, just like the eyes, these are unique works. And
yeah, so I did one for every pool ball there is. So it's from 1 to 16, and I made I also made the white one, which was much bigger, and it was already sent for a show in Arizona, which got canceled. But yeah, I did one for each ball because I just thought, like, I would like that. I would want it. Like, I don't know where it would exist, but I just did it for myself. And then that's why I have them in my studio, because like it's works that I want to be with.
And you might want to tell the viewers about the neon colored stones on the lower shelf as well too. For those of you who were in Miami during Art Basel Miami Beach this past December, the Bass Museum has an incredible sculpture by Ugo Rodinoni on the corner of Collins Avenue. And I'll just go to that for a second. It's this sculpture here, which is larger than life. And for those of you on the West Coast, there are 7 of these on a slightly smaller scale on the road between LA and Las Vegas. So in Miami, there was a an installation that was made around this piece, and unfortunately, I don't have a photo of it. But Andreas can explain the smaller stones.
Yeah, so Ugo Ordinone is one of my favorite artists. I've got loads of them, but I love his work. I love how like easily relatable it can be and how immediately visual impact it has. And so it was a 3-day installation where at the last day, which was a Sunday, you were able to take these stones home. So I took a few, I sent them by post to Cyprus, and then it took about 5 months for them to arrive because it was just stopping from custom to custom because they thought it was a suspicious parcel, so they were opening it at the time and they were closing it, so it got very redirected before it got back to me.
I can imagine. I can totally imagine with that. So, so this is a close up of one of the smaller works we just discussed a few minutes ago, called Abstraction number 7. That Andreas just explained to us. As you can see, it's quite small. It's 20 by 20. And it's spray paint, acrylic, chalk, and charcoal on canvas. And this is a much better close-up image, so you'll be able to see the layering of work and the materials that were used in this piece. And once again, if you're on your iPhone or iPad, you can zoom in and see this actually closer. And now let's shift gears, Andreas, and go to your sculptural work. So Andreas recently started working in sculpture. I'd say, I think earlier this year, I believe.
So I started, so they take a long time for them to start to finish. I started in December 19, but the first one didn't get completed until end of January. So because it usually takes 1 or 2 months for one of them to get completed. I mean, they started in 19. I had the first finished one in 2020. And I mean, to talk about this slide, these sculptures, visually now you can all see them, but for me, this character, this thing you see is something that always existed in my mind. So when I get clay, like this automatically comes out, like I just play with it and then I make these, like, I can see a few cartoon characters in each one, and each one like is slightly different. I mean, some have a bit more Mickey Mouse in them, some have a bit more Felix in them, some have like other characters. So yeah, that's what this is. It's like my consciousness coming out in sculpture.
Well, I think they're brilliant in terms of the layers. Once again, on the larger sculpture to the left, around the mouth, I see different colors going there, and I see right above the tongue, where it was black, I see the drip coming through. And I am not an artist; I'm just an advisor / collector. But I do know how difficult it is to work with drip painting. It's extremely difficult. It looks a lot easier than said. So I just think these are brilliant in terms of how you've controlled the drip. So
the thing is, it looks natural here. It looks natural. It looks like I've had zero effort in actually getting it drip that way. But I mean, for me to get to that result, I actually need to cover up lots of the drips in order for that black drip to just be there. So there's like constant layering of me keeping the drips I want, which was the mistakes I was talking earlier, which are perfect, and then the ones that I think are imperfect. So those need to be covered up. And it's this layering of information that gets to this final result. Also, one more thing about these, the way I see them is like they have their titles is each one has a different type of self-portrait. So I see these as self-portraits of myself at this stage. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting point.
And we'll go to the next slide so we can show the viewers how you start the process. So once again, you're using quick drying clay. And in this case, there's 2 types of used, the white as well as the brown.
Hmm.
Do you find a preference between the two?
Yeah, so I mean I've tried both. It's air drying clay, which is like a specific clay that if you leave for 2 weeks, it solidifies completely the same way that you would if you baked the clay. And for me, this immediacy and this I can work from my studio without needing like a workshop to work to. Like that's very handy for me. I mean I definitely prefer the white and I will never go back to the brown just because for me it's easier to visualize the colors. And also, I don't have a slide here. I was thinking is sometimes I get the white, I put it on Photoshop, I draw over it the colors I want to, and then I paint it so that I actually know the color balance I want to get to. Um, but yeah, for sure, the white helps me envision the color much easier than the brown ones.
We just got another question, Andreas, from Isa.
Hmm.
Um, he asks that you mentioned that character was always in your mind. Can you explain in what capacity? Is it an auto representation?
Um, so, I mean, I think that's two questions. So, yes, it is
Yes.
an auto representation, and I do see myself in these sculptures. But I think it's more about like these figures. Like for me, it's almost I imagined it before it actually happened. So that's what I mean. I mean, I see it here, and I'm like, yeah, that always existed.
Okay.
Hmm.
So going to the next slide now. Um, we're still in the.
Also, just Isa is works with pop fine art, and I've been Galstian Advisory and pop fine art has been the two people that from the very beginning really saw my work and appreciated it. So, I mean, thank you to both of you guys that were so early to like pick up on my work and understand it, to be so eager to like help me progress the work and show it and put it out there. So, yeah.
No, you're very welcome, and I'm sure Isa feels the same as well. Um, on that same note, I know I found you through social media.
Hmm.
Is that is that is that really the way you found other collectors as well as fans of your work as well, or has it been word of
I
mouth?
think, I mean, most of the work, if it's not friends and circle, it's social media. There hasn't been anything else that has uh, put my work out there at the moment. So yeah, I mean, it's a tool that without it, I mean, many artists right now are benefiting. I mean, there's nothing negative I can say about Instagram, for example.
Yeah, nor can I for that matter. So now in this image here, Andreas, we have a time lapse again, before and after,
Hmm.
and it looks very, very different. And just the layers of paint on the sculpture, I can see that the paint is also adding to the shape as well.
Yes.
Um,
I mean, I don't know. I mean, when I look at the left one, I really don't like what I'm seeing. And then when I look at the right one, I just love what I'm seeing. Even though before I put the black on it, I loved it also. So I mean, there's this process of like finding the balance of getting to love it back again, like you did at the very beginning before there was any color on it. I mean, I feel much freer adding color on the sculptures than I feel on the canvases because I feel like the the color on the color on the sculpture will either give it life or not. I need to bring them alive. So that's, I mean, it's giving them that life that they deserved from imagination to creation.
no, and I have to echo those words because I think sculpture needs color,
Mhm.
especially your sculptures. Um, they come to life. They're animated. The
Mhm.
canvases, I think, are a different story. The sculpture, I think, the boldness and the crispness. It's without doubt, you definitely, the color adds a lot to it. Um, Now, this is a shot of your studio. We can see some paintings in the background, but we can also see some finished sculptures, and some works in process. So, I do want to ask you about the coronavirus. I do know you mentioned earlier to me, but for the benefit of the audience, um, I know it's been kind of difficult for you to work out of your studio due to the restrictions in Cyprus. Could you just explain that to the viewers?
So at the moment, I don't go to the studio, even though, I mean, it's been very positive the last few days. They've told us that starting tomorrow, we'll have much more freedom to do things. So from tomorrow, I might be able to be going to the studio, which is amazing.
Okay.
But in a few weeks that I wasn't able to go there. And I mean, here you see some work in progress sculptures, you can see some finished ones. And then there you can see all the little paints, which are the it's the ceramic enamel I've been using. And I know they look tiny bottles, but I get so much out of each one. It's like they just make me happy.
Is it hard getting supplies during
Um,
the lockdown?
so right now, my red ran out, and the shop I buy it from cannot get any more red in. So yeah, right now I'm being affected, but up to now I was, because I have good ties with that shop, like they've been home delivering the supplies to me, so I'm very happy. It hasn't been too disconnected.
That's good. That's good. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit, Andreas, if you don't mind,
Yes.
and go to this image here that
Hmm.
shows. Um, Obviously, this sculpture has dried and is ready to be started.
Yes.
And it's interesting that you have it on your rack. And so, are these meant to be displayed on the table, or on a pedestal, or on a wall?
Okay.
Oh,
So um,
all three.
oh, I think it's all three. I mean, that rack, that's where I usually put my canvases to work on. And this time I put on the sculpture. And I just love how, I mean, all the sculptures have a hole at the back. So any sculpture could have been displayed on a wall. So I love that possibility for them. And I can't wait to experiment more visually of the ways they can be displayed. So yeah.
Oh, very good. So, we're in the present, and you're not working out of your studio.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this I think is remarkable with just sitting around playing with Cheetos
Mm-hmm.
and recreating one of your paintings that we saw
So
earlier.
this, I was in my studio. It was the week that the lockdown was happening, and no one was sure, like, are we allowed to go out, are we not allowed to go out? It wasn't like completely outlined what we were and weren't allowed to do. And some friends came up my studio, and we had Cheetos there, and we just started recreating one of my paintings. And I think that's, I mean, how things like bring, I mean, we wouldn't have had the time to do that otherwise. So I mean, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fun. So this next one is um, one sculpture, right, from different
Yes, so
perspectives,
this is
and
different perspectives.
it's also the first time I think I'm seeing you using teal or like a bluish teal with purple, as opposed to the prior sculptures you were in primary colors, blacks and whites and reds.
Mhm. So, I mean, this is a very small one, so I felt free to do whatever I wanted. I didn't feel like it's going to be a massive statement, but this is like, I mean, it's inspired by the coronavirus, and it was like happening, I mean, midway where we are right now. And it was, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's not something to make fun of, and it's not, I don't know how lightly you should be taking everything, but it's just like trying to like visualize and uh, communicate like what's going on around you in the world. And I think artists have that opportunity to just work with the now, and that's what I was working with.
Hmm. Now we're going to move over to your works on paper.
Mm-hmm.
And these are five smaller works on paper that are very colorful, that are very whimsical. And, right now I have a huge smile on my face when I see these, as I always do. So, are these done in a sketchbook, or are these done on small?
Okay, so these are like tiny little um, cards. It's the size of a business card, and the way I see this is like it's the only kind of work I can finish in one sitting, and it's like they're usually very affected from my day. So, I mean, it's like it's a logbook of me putting down like the the, the moment, and it's just like, I mean, I see them a bit like an investigation, just like a reporter would like. Okay, what's the subject today? What's going on today? Like, I mean, if it's Easter, I feel like Easter. Like, what's that? And like this is what this series is about. Yeah, I mean, I love doing them. That's why they're all so happy.
Yeah, no, they're wonderful. Now, this one here, um, the final work is on the right,
Hmm.
but we have a close-up zoom shot on the left.
Hmm.
So this one to me is just looks very painstaking to sit down and create this. But it's the same
Yeah.
figure throughout, I believe, right?
Hmm. So this is the first time I've shown publicly this work, and I mean, this was the first one I did. I think now I'm down to the 10th one in isolation. So this series started exclusively because of the amount of time we have at home. This wouldn't have existed if not for coronavirus. So, I mean, some good things come from something bad. I mean, it's not always all negative. But, I mean, these are like, it's a very meditative process of me sitting down and spending a whole day on a work, and then it's still not finished. I mean, this is the roughest one because it was the first one. I know, I mean, there aren't many imperfections, but for me, I see them, and I think I'm probably going to keep this one forever because I love this one so much because it was the first ever one. But yeah, it's a very I mean, it's just a new direction that this time has given me.
Yeah. I'm just going to fast forward a second to show the viewers the table you're using to create the work.
Mhm. So this is my studio right now. I've got two different tables in the house, and the one I work on smaller works, and the big one I work on the bigger works. And yeah, if you see there, uh, I attached the chopstick onto the little pencil because uh, I had run out of the pencil. The supplier was waiting for the new delivery of these colored pencils I'm using because they're like a very soft. It's not your regular pencil. It's like these softer colored pencils that leave a bigger mark on your paper. And it's just I didn't have any more pink, so I had to like attach a chopstick to it to work with.
It's very clever.
Yeah.
Very, very clever. Now, this is another one in terms of what your initial studio was your home,
Mhm.
and you were painting. I remember seeing the image on the left when we first started talking about the works.
Yes. So this is like my transition in studios before I got back to home. But the one is my backyard. And that was the beginning of last summer where I started making the works in my backyard. And then how I just, as soon as I knew I was ready to like take the step into making this my like life choice, I immediately got the studio and I started working in there. I mean, something that it's good to mention is that what you see there is the clean room of the studio. And then I've got the dirty room of the studio, which is, I mean, if you go back, we showed it we've got some new viewers. So maybe we can go to that very first slide.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is the dirty room. And here it's where I spray paint and the shelves are covered with dust. It's just impossible. I mean, I'm already thinking of like, I need a warehouse where half of it is just a dirty room.
It's nice how you're expanding already within 8 months or 9 months of having the studio. Um,
No, because now I know what works. And I mean, I'm very happy with the space I have. And it's good, it's two rooms, so I can use them accordingly. But yeah, I know I want to move on to slightly bigger works. Yeah.
yeah. So going back to the clean room of your studio, I see some works on the wall,
Hmm.
um, and I see on the right hand side a round canvas.
That's the white ball I was talking about earlier.
Yes,
So, yeah.
that's why I brought that up to for you to talk about that as well because you mentioned that earlier. And
So, I mean, I have each ball into these circular small canvases, and then I thought, I mean, the white ball is like the special ball. It's the one you always hit. So I mean, I thought the white one has to be the special one. So I made this white. I wish I had a better image because here it looks like it's too fuzzy, whereas like there's a lot of like detail in it and layering. But I mean, it's just again these characters, and it's just distorted into forming the ball, and the canvas is the boundary of it. So yeah, that's what that one is.
so a question has come in, Andreas, from Guy. He asks, Andreas, your works are so inspiring. What do you see coming next for you? What's the future?
Okay, I mean, I I already I mean, I'm a planner, so I already know, I mean, I think that comes from architecture. I already know what works I'll be producing in the future, but I see more texture coming in. I see more layering. I see more depth. And I just can't wait to get to the colors I want to use, because at the moment I have 7 canvases planned for the possibility. I mean, we've been talking with one amazing gallery in Cyprus about having a show there, and that I have 7 canvases planned for that, which would each one would be it would have a hint of color, and I'm already thinking, and that's what I'm planning at the moment.
And just to reiterate, right now, because of the lockdown, you're not able to paint canvases at your home.
Mm-hmm. So the only thing that I can't do at the moment, because I can do sculptures, I could do canvases, but the luxury of the studio really, like, it feels better. It feels good to paint a canvas in the studio. So I don't feel like, why put myself through the situation of like doing it in the backyard if it's not comfortable. So I'm just waiting for the moment to be able to go back to the studio and paint canvases. So yeah, that's the thing that I can't do at the moment.
Another question has come in, Andreas, from Lucas. Do you feel that scale is restrictive? Will a larger canvas give you the freedom to try new things with your characters?
I mean, everything is, there's always a restriction. Even the biggest canvas, there's still a restriction there. So, of course, but I think the good thing about it is that you can use these restrictions to your benefit. And I know I already have a massive canvas, which I'm ready to work on. And I can't wait. That's still a restriction to me. So I can't wait to tackle that also.
What are your influences? Who do you feel influenced by? I know you as a person, but most of the viewers may or may not know. So let's spend a few minutes to talk about that as well.
Okay. So there are 2 things that influence me and inspire me to paint. Not inspire me to paint, but inspire me. So there are 2 things. Bad artworks and good artworks. Like for me, they equally give me inspiration, because when I see something bad, I'm like, oh, I can do something better. And I'm not talking I'm not trying to bring anyone down here. And I would never, a good artist can have a bad painting, and I can see that. And when I see that, that inspires me. And then when an amazing painting by a bad artist, or there are no bad artists, but it's a constant push and pull of like good and bad between paintings. And then when I see that greatness, I just feel like, oh, I can achieve that, like start. And then maybe just to bring in one artist that influences me a lot is so there's a photographer called Wolfgang Tillmans, which I love and collect. And his work is, the process is he clicks the camera button. There's a whole magic happening between like a click and what the image is.
Yes.
But I just feel like the way he chooses a composition and the frame, for me, like that's something I strive for, and that's something that inspires me. Like, how can that little frame of a photograph, no matter how small or big, is perfect. So that's an inspiration. Like, how can I have, in no matter what size of piece of paper or canvas, like how can I have that as like the perfect example? So that's something inspiring.
Yes. No, I agree. And this one here, I see you're using some text in your paintings as well too. So you're kind of going away from the characters now into text work. And seeing the painting you liked is not as good as a painting you did not like. That's actually quite clever.
Yeah, I think this was happening in between. I don't think I've moved away from characters or into text. I think I like working in everything. Like I would never not try something because someone else did it, or because, oh, that's not what I do. I just do what I feel like is right for me. And this text painting, it definitely doesn't look like an etruche, but for me, it just has everything that I needed to convey at that moment. And I wasn't able to show that with a character. I needed text to tell you that, it was something I needed to say. And this is the most liked image in my Instagram ever. I think I have the same number of followers, the same number of likes. And I think that's very difficult for anyone to achieve. And I just think that, I mean, I could make more text paintings because they're popular, but I don't feel like doing them, so I won't. When I feel like doing one, I'll do one. So yeah, that's.
I can definitely, I can definitely sympathize with this painting, because I know a lot of collectors, as I'm sure some of the viewers are as well too, where you buy what you love, and suddenly you see the same artist has a different work a few months later that you love even more than the one you bought. So it's
So that, yeah, I mean,
so
that's tough. I think the most people that can relate with this, I mean, from my experiences, I constantly get artists sharing this on their stories, and the way they see it is like, why do some collectors like this series of work I did, which is shit? They say that to me, and they can't appreciate these amazing paintings I've done right now. And I mean, I think that's what this is about. I mean, of course, as a collector, you buy something and then you see something greater and, oh, why did I like that at the time? But I think this is more about like the appreciation of artists and the different stages for them. And that's exactly why I painted this.
So once again, for the viewers who just joined late, feel free to submit any questions you have by using the Q&A link. We'll be very happy to address those in the few minutes that we have left. So Andreas, you mentioned that you collect art as well too. Is that what really gave you the impetus to become an artist?
It's definitely a good tool to have. I mean, if I could give one point of advice to an artist, I mean, it's a very difficult thing to do. But like, if you go out there, collect work, you will realize how's the right way to go about into promoting yourself and having yourself and staging the work. I mean, there's a lot like that an artist, I mean, I haven't trained as an artist in university. So of course, what I don't know how to do is I don't know how to stretch a canvas. I think that's a workshop that artists have, which it would be amazing if I did, but I mean, that's not one of my skills. But then being a collector, like, it just makes you see like what would go in an art fair? How do I get into an art fair? Like, what do I need to do to get there? Like, it's things that I'm aware of. Maybe I'm not there yet, but I just know what needs to be done. Whereas like an artist, I think, without having collected and seen how the art market works, like would have been in the same disadvantage that I am, that I haven't studied art. So yeah.
It's a good point that you raised. I mean, I know a lot of folks that work for stretcher board companies that stretch canvas for a living, many of whom are not artists, who don't know how to hold a brush, and they joke that they can finger paint, but that's not quite the same thing that you can do. But it's a very good response. Christopheros is asking, collecting or painting? I don't understand the question, Christopheros. Could you expand on that?
If I could only do one, I mean, I don't think that would ever be a question for me, because I mean, I have the luxury to do both. So I would never put myself into like, oh, I'd rather be collecting than painting, or I'd rather be painting. But I mean, it really depends on the level of collecting you're talking or the level of painting you're talking. And for sure, painting, because that is less stressful than collecting. And it just, I mean, both are satisfying, but I just think that, I mean, I wouldn't want to be a career of a collector. Like, what's that? A flipper? Like, that's not what I want. So, I mean, it's really like, what are we talking about? Like, it's a very big discussion to be had.
No, it is. Another question just came in, Andreas, from Anonymous. How difficult was it to shift from an architectural career to an art career?
I mean, it was, I think it was difficult socially. It was difficult as a choice, as a decision. It wasn't difficult as in, is it difficult to paint now? I mean, that's what I always wanted to do. It's more about like, you've invested in something that you say, that's not what I want to pursue. I think that's what's difficult, even though all those tools can, I mean, I can use the tools I've learned to pursue whatever I would have wanted to do. So, I mean,
Andreas is asking, do you prefer making sculptures or canvas painting?
it's a break. So the one gives me a break from the others. So, I mean, there wouldn't be like a preference. It's more about what do I feel preference for. It's Monday. How do I feel like? Do I want to make a canvas or a sculpture? And then I would totally have a preference there. Like there are moments where I really don't want to see a canvas. And then there are moments where I'm just too tired to make a sculpture. So yeah, it's not a straightforward.
No, and and I think you're correct in that because you said earlier in terms of because of the lockdown, you're doing some drawing now, um, and you can't do the canvas paint. You can't paint right now in your home, so it's nice that you're exploring new avenues. Have you thought about um, doing a small video or some like animated short or a film
Animated short. Um,
with these
I,
characters?
I mean, so I mean that's I would love to make a video, like an animated short, like a video display for a gallery for sure. I mean, it's not something that I'm working on. It's not something that I've thought for the near future, but it's something that I mean, I've worked with animation before. It's not something I enjoy doing. So I would totally need an assistant to help me do it just because of how difficult I know it is. And I've done it. But I think it would be like amazing with my work. Like it's something that fits it so well.
Nick is asking, do you have any plans for an exhibition in London?
So I'm in the talks with a gallery in London, but there's nothing. I mean, I'm not. I've already got like a plan of like the next cities that I could and I want to and I will exhibit, and that's in the US and in Cyprus. So those are my first stepping stones, and then I will work with other cities.
Yeah. Lucas is asking, how do you cope when someone gives you a bad critique about one of your works? Which never happens, I'm sure.
No, I'm trying to think because I mean it's why do everyone I mean usually people highlight the best in things, and I mean I'm a true believer that you should I mean if you don't have something nice to say, don't say it at all, because that's how I work. That's how I give my advice. The worst critique that comes is from myself, and I hate that. Like there are times when I see something and I really don't like it and I need to fix it, and that's a really bad position. Like I hate when I don't like something that's happening until it gets better and it fixes itself. It doesn't fix itself, I fix it. But I mean, that moment of like doubting yourself and doubting a painting, I think that's not a very nice situation to be in. And it's something that, I mean, that's the struggle of like an artwork. It's not like a 3D model of some sort that it starts and you just build on it. I mean, it's the same, but it's just very tough when a painting is not coming across as you want it for yourself. So I would say I hate it when I give bad critique to myself.
And we have time for one last question that's come in from Katerina.
Mm-hmm.
Andreas, what were your first steps when you made the decision to become an artist?
I bought paint. So I went out, I bought paint, I bought canvases, I came home and I started painting. And I'm trying to think, like, I mean, I was working as an architect at the time. It was a weekend. And I was like, you know what? I want to do this. And I mean, I don't know, I started an artist profile on the same day. And on the same week, I had a painting sold for a lot of money. And I was like, wow, like I can do this, you know? I mean, it's amazing. I mean, Instagram gave me this confidence. Like the first confidence was because of like my work was accepted on social media. So yeah, that was the first step. And then from there, I was able to, with the help of galleries, to like move my work to a bigger presence and a better position.
Well, thank you, Andreas, for this time we've had for this conversation. Thank you to the viewers for today's session. We have the third in our conversation series on Wednesday with Catalina Gerardo. So thank you again, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your weekend.
And thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate the time you spent with us.